Okay, class, so as we start our science lesson for today, we are going to kind of talk a little bit about something we talked about previously about ecosystems. Do you guys remember talking about ecosystems and what that entails?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you hear the word ecosystem, what do you think about? What does it make you think about?
Like the way animals, the way maybe they live their lives, or
Good, keep going.
or maybe how they eat other animals.
Good. So we talk about their ecosystem is everything where they live, the habitat they live in, what other animals may exist with them. So good, you're on the right train of thought. So what we're going to touch a little bit more about on today in our science lesson is we are going to develop a model. So you guys get to create your own type of model based off food chains and the ecosystem. So the main focus we're going to be focusing on today is animals in our own community where we live. So we live in Bonsall, and what are some of the animals that you have seen in our society?
Coyotes, birds, snakes, owls, rabbits.
Good. So we see a lot of different types of animals. You talked about birds, talked about coyotes, you talked about reptiles. So lots of different animals and wildlife that we have in our community. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those. But first, what we're going to talk about is the different types of food chains in our community. So on the whiteboard, I'm going to write a list of 3 different types of food chains. And we discussed a little bit of them before, so this is going to refresh your memory on some stuff we've learned. So we have here, we're going to have our decomposers. Then we have our producers. And we have our consumers. Do you know we're going to take a lot of the wildlife and animals that you just said, and we're going to put them in our different categories. And if we don't have something in our category, we're going to figure out what could fit in one of those categories. So what was some of the wildlife that you discussed?
Birds, owls, coyotes.
Good. So what would those be considered? Decomposers. So let's start with, what was the first one you said? Birds.
Mm-hmm.
Would those be our decomposers, our producers? Do they produce food?
No.
Or are they consumers? Do they eat food?
Consume.
Consumers. So we're going to put birds over here. Could they only be consumers?
No, they could be decomposers too.
Maybe not decomposers, but could they be producers? Could they produce food for other animals?
Yeah.
How?
The other animals, like a hawk, could eat them.
They could eat a bird, or they could eat, what do birds lay?
Eggs.
Eggs. So other animals might eat their eggs. So that could be a way that they're producers, right? They're producing food for other animals. So birds, see, so some animals can fit in more than one category. What about, give me another thing you want to fill in a category, and where would it go?
Would snake be a consumer?
Yes. So I would say that almost all animals, because all animals go through a life cycle, right? Eventually all animals die. Even as big as coyotes, sometimes coyotes get hit by cars and sometimes they die. And what can happen to the coyotes when they die?
Something else, like a hawk, could eat them.
A hawk could eat them. Good. So you could basically put all of our animals under consumers and producers.
You could put mushrooms under decomposers.
Mushrooms under decomposers. Awesome. You are remembering what we've talked about. What do the mushrooms do as decomposers?
Well, they're a plant, so some animals wouldn't eat them because some of them are poisonous, but
what do the mushrooms do?
Let's say they produce air and they clean the air.
Good. So they kind of clean. So when we have a big tree and it has lots of leaves on it and the leaves fall off the tree and they land on the ground, how do those leaves get taken back into the dirt and created like into the soil? That would be the
mushrooms.
The mushrooms do that. So they are our decomposers. Do you know any other decomposers? What about things that are little and wiggly and they're
worms?
Worms. Good. So we have worms can go under here, and then some other decomposers we can have are like beetles.
Would a squirrel be a consumer and a producer?
Correct. So squirrels, any type of animal.
A chicken could be a producer because you eat chicken.
A chicken could be a producer, and the chickens like to eat plants. And where do you think plants would go?
Producers.
Plants would be producers. So any type of plant, because some animals, we have 3 different types of animals based off what they eat. Do you know what some of those would be called? Do you know what a herbivore is?
Yeah, a herbivore, they lay eggs and they eat meat, I think. Or they are meat.
They don't eat meat. So what do they eat?
They eat plants and leaves.
Plants only. So they're like vegetarians in a sense where they don't eat meat. They are herbivores. So your deers and your rabbits, those would be the types of herbivores we have in our community. What's a carnivore? Do you know what a carnivore is?
Carnivore eats meat.
Eats meat
like
only. So like a dinosaur. But do we have
Some.
dinosaurs in our community?
No.
No more dinosaurs in our community anymore. But like coyotes would eat them, would be carnivores.
Snake.
A hawk would be a carnivore.
Snake.
Snakes would be carnivores because snakes do not eat plants, right? And then we have
Maybe they try it.
our omnivores. Do you know what an omnivore is?
They eat both meat and
They
plants.
eat both meat and plants. What category do you think humans go under?
Both plants and humans. Omnivore.
So an omnivore, right? So what we're going to do today is we're talking about food chains in our ecosystem and the animals in our community. So our main project, so I'm glad that we talked about decomposers, producers, and consumers. So what you're going to do is I have printed up a picture of all the animals in our community. So we have worms and we have mushrooms and we have rabbits, and this is a little caterpillar. That would be our decomposer. We've got squirrels and coyotes and hawks and snakes. So what you're going to do with a partner in your group, or with a partner, I'm going to pair you up in partners, and you're going to take a blank piece of paper and you are going to make a model and describe how plants, animals, decomposers all work together in our environment to create a type of food chain. So you can be creative. You are going to, each pair of partners is going to get this specific with all these pictures. You can cut them out. And then on this, you can do whatever you want. You can draw the sun and some clouds. You can draw some plants because I don't have any plants printed up.
Do I draw put it under, do I draw producers?
So let's see, where do you think, when you create your poster, where do you think the worms and the mushrooms are going to go?
They're going to go in the decomposers.
Well, so where do decomposers usually work their magic?
In the jungle or?
In the grass and the leaves. So maybe if you draw a tree where all the leaves have fallen, you can cut this picture out and put the mushrooms over here, and you're going to label them. So everything needs to be labeled. Your decomposers, your producers. So you can kind of group your decomposers in one. Then you can label your producers, which would be what on here would be our producers? Maybe
the bunny rabbit and maybe the squirrel
and maybe the squirrel and maybe the
snake.
Maybe the snake would be our producer. The caterpillar is going to be with your decomposers because he eats a lot of the leaves and breaks them down. And then guess who eats the caterpillar? Probably the squirrel, maybe the coyote. So they all work together to work in their ecosystem, right? And then once you're done, we're going to share these. You and your partner are going to share them in front of the whole entire class, okay? So does anybody have any questions before we get started and I release you to create your model of the ecosystem? No questions? Okay, awesome. So I will start handing out our materials and you may get started, and you can use markers or crayons or whatever you would like.